Most relationships don't fail because people stop loving each other. They fail because people don't understand what love is actually responding to in the first place. And once you see this, it becomes very hard to unsee. Think about the last relationship that really hurt you. Not just the breakup, but the slow confusion before it. The mixed signals, the arguments that never really went anywhere. The feeling that no matter how much you talked, nothing actually changed. Most people explain that experience in simple terms. They say things like we couldn't communicate, or we wanted different things, or they just weren't emotionally mature. Those explanations sound reasonable, but they're incomplete. Because if communication was the real issue, then talking more would fix relationships. And if emotional maturity was the problem, then people would naturally choose healthier partners as they got older. But that's not what we see. We see people repeating the same relationship patterns again and again, even when they know better. We see smart, self-aware people staying attached to relationships that clearly don't work. And we see people leaving stable, healthy connections because something feels missing, even when nothing is actually wrong. So the real question isn't, why do relationships fail? The real question is, why do people keep choosing relationships that were never designed to work in the first place? Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Relationships don't fail at the surface level. They fail at the level of emotional conditioning. Most of what drives attraction, attachment, and conflict happens below conscious thought, not because people are irrational, but because the emotional brain learns rules very early in life, and it follows those rules quietly. This is why advice alone rarely works. You can understand what a healthy relationship looks like and still feel drawn to something that hurts you. You can know your boundaries and still struggle to enforce them when it matters. You can want stability and still feel bored by peace. That's not a character flaw, it's conditioning. And if you don't understand the conditioning, you'll keep blaming the wrong things: communication, timing, personality, while the real driver stays untouched. Let's start with one of the biggest myths in modern relationships. The idea that communication fixes everything. Communication matters. Yes, but communication doesn't override emotional wiring. Two people can communicate clearly and still be emotionally incompatible. They can understand each other perfectly and still trigger each other's deepest fears. They can agree on the facts and still feel unsafe, unseen, or disconnected. Why? Because communication happens at the level of words. But relationships are run by emotional states. When someone feels emotionally threatened, their nervous system takes over. Logic drops, listening narrows, and defensiveness is on a rise. At that point, communication doesn't solve anything. It becomes another battlefield. This is why arguments often feel circular. You're not arguing about the issue. You're reacting to how the issue makes you feel. And most people never realize that their reactions are older than the relationship itself. Your emotional brain doesn't think in timelines. It thinks in patterns. It remembers how love felt before you had words for it. How closeness felt. How distance felt. How approval, rejection, safety, and unpredictability felt. Those early emotional experiences quietly teach you what love is supposed to feel like, not what love should be. And this is where many relationships are set up to fail, because familiarity feels like truth. If love once felt inconsistent, intense, or uncertain, then calm love can feel empty. If closeness once came with anxiety, then peace can feel suspicious. If affection had to be earned, then unconditional care can feel undeserved. People don't chase what's healthy. They chase what feels familiar, even when it hurts. This is where things get uncomfortable. That instant spark people talk about. That intense pull. That feeling of, this feels different. Often, that's not chemistry. It's recognition. Your nervous system recognizes a pattern it already knows how to play. That doesn't mean attraction is bad, but intensity alone doesn't mean compatibility. And it definitely does not mean safety. Many people mistake emotional activation for connection. They confuse anxiety with excitement. They confuse unpredictability with depth. And then they build a relationship on top of that confusion. At first, it feels alive, charged, meaningful. But over time, the same emotional triggers that created the spark begin to create conflict. The highs demand lows. The closeness demands distance. The uncertainty demands reassurance. And suddenly the relationship becomes exhausting. Not because the people are bad, but because the foundation was never stable to begin with. Here's something almost no one talks about. Every relationship has an unspoken emotional contract. Not a conscious one, an emotional one. Something like, I'll stay close as long as you help me feel safe in the way I learned safety. I'll give love as long as you don't trigger the fear I never learned how to regulate. I'll stay attached as long as this dynamic keeps my emotional world familiar. When both people's contracts align, the relationship feels easy. When they don't, tension grows, even if both people have good intentions. This is why love alone isn't enough, because love doesn't rewrite emotional contracts. Awareness does. Here's the key insight most people miss. Relationships don't fail because people stop trying. They fail because people are trying to solve emotional problems with behavioral solutions. They try to talk more instead of regulating their nervous system. They try to set boundaries without understanding the fear behind breaking them. They try to be more confident without addressing why closeness feels threatening in the first place. Until someone understands their own emotional patterns, relationships become a cycle. Same feelings, different person. And the cycle doesn't break when you meet the right person. It breaks when you stop expecting relationships to heal what they didn't create. That's the shift most people never make. So what do healthy relationships actually require? Healthy relationships aren't built on intensity. They're built on capacity. The capacity to stay present when things feel uncomfortable. The capacity to self-regulate instead of react. The capacity to recognize when an emotion belongs to the past, not the person in front of you. This is why emotional maturity matters more than chemistry, and why self-awareness matters more than compatibility tests. When someone understands their emotional patterns, relationships stop feeling confusing. Choices become clearer. Boundaries feel less dramatic. Attraction becomes calmer. Not boring, but grounded. So if you've been wondering why relationships keep ending the same way, why communication hasn't fixed what you thought it would, why love sometimes feels harder than it should, it's not because you're broken. And it's not because you haven't tried hard enough. It's because relationships do not operate at the level most people are taught to look. Once you shift your attention from behavior to emotional patterns, everything changes. Not overnight, but permanently. And that's what most people are really searching for. Not a perfect relationship, but one that finally makes sense.